The New Bedford Sea whispered tales of old into Daniel Hawthorne's ears, a rhythm so familiar yet alien, much like the town he called home. A mournful gust twirled its salty fingers through his graying hair, the lighthouse's intermittent flashes casting long, specter-like shadows on his weathered face. "Too many broken promises," he murmured to the silent graves around him, his heart echoing with the painful resonance of a regret left to fester. His words were not for the sleeping residents of the town's cemetery, but for one in particular, her name etched in cold stone, a perennial reminder of love lost. The quiet town of New Bedford, nestled in Massachusetts, cradled a peculiar secret in its bosom. The dead were being stolen. A chill of apprehension had settled over the townsfolk, much akin to the dense fog that rolled in each morning from the Atlantic. And it was to Daniel that their fear-stricken faces turned, an earnest hope in their eyes that the affable private investigator would restore their peace. Amidst the quiet mourning of his heart, he found his resolve. He had accepted the grim task. At first glance, it was the missing corpses that stirred the town. But as he scratched beneath the surface, subtle nuances of fear, carefully veiled behind polite smiles and clipped conversations, started to unfold. One such revelation occurred in the old morgue. A cavernous, stone structure, it reeked of formaldehyde and forgotten lives. "No signs of breaking in, you say?" Daniel queried the mortician, a thin man who wore the pallor of the bodies he tended to. "None at all, Hawthorne. One day they're here, the next they're gone," he replied, his gaze fixed on an empty gurney. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with unsaid words and unseen fears. Daniel traversed the cobblestone streets of New Bedford, threading together the silent dread that clung to the townsfolk like a second skin. From hushed meetings with the grief-stricken families to an elusive historian who hinted at a past the town wanted to forget, each conversation was a breadcrumb leading to an increasingly intricate labyrinth of terror. His day ended as it began, by the grave of his wife. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with melancholic hues, he found himself whispering into the wind, "I miss you, Emily." A shiver ran down his spine, not from the creeping chill of the night, but from an uncanny sense of dread that had begun to settle in his bones. The shadows were stirring, and he was poised on the precipice of an abyss he could not yet see. The echoes of a history steeped in darkness were beginning to ripple the surface of New Bedford's quiet sea. And as the last light faded from the horizon, he could only hope he was ready to face whatever emerged from the depths. Dawn crept over New Bedford like a hesitant ghost, the muted light seeping into the crevices of the quaint town. Amidst its slumbering silhouette, one man had been awake for hours. Daniel found no peace in the clutches of sleep, the silent specters of his dreams merging with the disquiet of his waking hours. He made his way to the morgue in the gray morning light, a path eerily familiar yet laden with newly budding apprehension. The mortician, looking even more gaunt in the dreary morning, nodded toward the basement. He descended, each step echoing in the silence, into the belly of the morgue. The air grew thicker, the chill seeping into his bones, as he found himself standing before an etching on the cold stone wall. It was a grotesque symbol, like a knot woven from shadow and dread. His heart pounded a strange rhythm, recognition and alienation, dancing in a macabre waltz within his mind. His conversations with the townsfolk began to shift, his questions unearthing buried fears. He met with the local historian in a forgotten corner of the town's library, dust-filled sunlight filtering through the stained glass windows. "It's the mark of the old cult," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They believed in other things, entities beyond the stars." A strange energy pulsed in the town, like an undercurrent of terror only he could perceive. His interactions became cloaked in a chilling undercurrent, a sense of otherness that painted New Bedford in a spectral hue. The cosmic horror that the historian spoke of took form in his dreams. He found himself lost amidst alien constellations, cryptic symbols dancing around him, shadows moving in corners that should not exist. They were glimpses, fragments of an obscured reality that gnawed at the edges of his sanity. His personal demons clawed their way to the surface, the echoes of his wife's laughter merging with the sorrowful cries of their estranged daughter. The cult's dark influence wove itself into his waking life, in his dreams, blurring the line between the two. At the edge of the town, the urban landscape gave way to the neglected wilderness. An abandoned church stood, a silent sentinel against the backdrop of the encroaching twilight. He stood before it, the whispers of the townsfolk, the cryptic symbol, and his haunted dreams converging on this spectral edifice. The church was the cult's forgotten sanctuary, its eerie silence a sardonic mockery of the cosmic horror that was beginning to unfold. He could almost hear the past chanting, the rituals echoing through the desolate chambers, a knot of unseen horror waiting to be unraveled. As night cloaked New Bedford in its dark veil, he stood on the brink of the abyss, the whispers of the dark stirring the shadows in his heart. The unseen knot was beginning to unravel, the thread leading him further into the heart of the cosmic horror that had ensnared his town. The daunting task that lay ahead was shrouded in terrifying obscurity, but he knew that he was the town's only hope. The deserted church wore the eerie stillness of forgotten prayers, its creaking wooden pews holding on to whispers of ancient worship. Stepping inside felt akin to crossing a threshold into an arcane world, and Daniel, the compassionate investigator, found himself standing in the echo chamber of a dread-filled past. The whispers of the town, the cryptic symbols, the shivers running down his spine, all seemed to converge in this ancient structure. Amidst the decaying holy text and musty religious relics, he discovered a chilling scripture of the cult, its faded pages whispering tales of the unimaginable, the dark aim of reanimating the dead. The cult's rituals revolved around the cosmic entity they worshipped, a deity they fondly called the Eternal Dreamer. A chill ran down his spine as he read of their offerings, the bodies of the recently deceased, to usher in the awakening of their god. His world began to shift on its axis, the ordinary tainted with the extraordinary, the veil of his known reality being pierced by the needle of cosmic horror. Being the open-minded man he was, he found his worldview crumbling. His core belief, seeking truth in the apparent, started to meld with a newfound acceptance of the unfathomable. The cult's sinister motives took a horrific form in his dreams. He walked through halls of darkness, hearing the chants of the cult, their ritualistic fervor echoing in his ears. He saw the shadows move, the constellations shift, and he felt an icy dread settling in the pit of his stomach, a reminder of the atrocities performed in the name of faith. Amidst this, his personal demons danced around the edges of his psyche, twisting into forms more terrifying than he had ever encountered. He witnessed his wife's shadow being consumed by the cosmic terror. He saw his daughter, her face awash with fear, estranged and unreachable. His grief and guilt melded into a specter of its own, giving the cult's horror a mournful touch. He confronted his own reflection, his face lit by the ethereal glow of the moonlight seeping through the church's shattered stained glass window, showed a man balancing on the edge of reason. His eyes held a strange resolve, a testament to his indomitable spirit. He was no longer just an investigator. He had become the harbinger of hope for New Bedford, the sole warrior against the encroaching darkness. Outside, the wind howled in tandem with his burgeoning fear, carrying whispers of the cult's misdeeds. The shadow of the old church stretched across the ground, a grim specter awaiting its morbid revival. The cosmic horror that he had only started to unravel echoed in his mind, an ominous prelude to the battle that lay ahead. The sea echoed a harsh requiem as a storm gathered on the horizon, cloaking New Bedford in a shroud of tension. The restless town slept, its dreams imbued with a spectral fear, oblivious to the showdown about to unfold. Beneath the tempestuous sky, Daniel stood before the morgue, the final battlefield where his fight against the cult would come to a head. His heart pounded an ominous rhythm, a symphony woven from his personal demons and the cosmic terror that had begun to gnaw at the edges of his sanity. Inside the morgue, the cult had gathered. They were an eerie tableau against the gleaming metal and cold tiles, their faces masked in blind devotion, their hands clutching at the veil of reality, ready to tear it apart. Their chanting filled the air, a dirge for the living and an anthem for their dormant deity. He felt the weight of the world shift, The uncanny knowledge of an indifferent cosmic entity seeped into his very being, blending the familiar dread of losing a loved one with the alien terror of the unknown. The horror that had been growing since he took the case now came to a head in the showdown. Not just a fight against a cult, but against a reality larger and more terrifying than he had ever imagined. Yet amidst this chaotic symphony of terror and impending doom, he reached out to his estranged daughter. His voice quivered as he dialed her number, the pulsating dread of the cult's activity becoming a heart-wrenching backdrop to his personal anguish. His call was a desperate tether to the world he knew, a world that was slipping away with every chant the cult uttered. As his daughter answered, a wave of relief washed over him, momentarily dispelling the shadows cast by the cult. The conversation was laden with regret, with long overdue confessions, and with a desperate plea for reconciliation. His battle against the cult mirrored his struggle with his guilt, each victory won in the real world echoing as a triumph over his inner demons. With his daughter's voice anchoring him to reality, he stepped forward. His voice broke through the chanting, a stern command echoing through the sterile halls of the morgue. He prevailed over the cult, disrupting the ritual, preventing the horror they intended to unleash. He stood alone amidst the silenced cultists, the grip of cosmic terror slowly relinquishing its hold on New Bedford. His heart pounded with the aftershocks of his victory and the relief of a town saved. Battered but not broken, he was looking towards a dawn breaking over the storm-tossed sea, his conversation with his daughter a promise of a new beginning. But even as he tasted victory, the lingering horror remained, a whisper in the wind, a shiver down the spine. The knowledge of something far larger than human comprehension existing beyond the veil of reality was a scar that would forever mark him. But with the prospect of mending the relationship with his daughter, Daniel found strength. He was victorious, yet forever changed, standing against the backdrop of a new dawn, ready to confront the trials of his personal life, forever marked by the echoes of the cosmic horror he had faced. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like it and subscribe to our channel, where you can find more similar stories, and click on the bell icon to never miss one. There is plenty more cosmic horror to come from the Eldritch Tales Factory. Stay tuned, and until next time.